I wanted to make a video about breaking the cycle. Everybody's heard the term, but not a lot of people talk about what breaking the cycle actually entails. What are the burdens that come along with it? What are some of the hardships that you have to deal with personally in order to break whatever cycle you're trying to break, whether it be drug addiction, child abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence problems. That could entail a myriad of things other than what I listed, so it's not limited to just that. I can really only speak from personal experience. I'm clearly not a mental health professional, but I do know what has worked for me, and that's about the best that I can give you. So to give a little context, I think what sparked this whole video idea was I was listening to the radio the other day, and I heard a Papa Roach song come on, Broken Home. If you have never heard it, I'm going to post a link in the description so you can check out the original video for that. But there was one area of it that really got my brain thinking about actually breaking the cycle. And it was a line talking about a broken home, obviously, where a child's dad leaves and he couldn't figure out why. He just wanted to know, like, the real story, wanted to know the truth. And then once he got older, he figured out that the dad's father did that to him. So that's often the case. Most people who grow up without a father end up, unfortunately, living lives of a childless father, either through their own decisions or through the decisions of the mother, or whatever the case may be. That is statistically usually what happens. I am one of those. However, I've chosen to stay completely involved in my kids' lives, and in fact, I have full custody of my oldest son, and I'm currently married with two young ones still at home with their mother. For me, since my ex-wife wanted a divorce, many years ago, I was faced with a difficult decision, and it was either stay present physically and not be able to afford where we were living and not be able to afford anything financially, or go somewhere where I could make more money and support financially. So I chose the latter. As a result of that, there was 2 years that went by where I didn't get to see a whole lot of my kids. And then after that, I got into a position financially where I could actually take them on. And from then until now, I've had them every single summer, every spring break, every Christmas break, so on and so forth. Now I have a 19-year-old daughter who I just moved up here. And that's the reason for the delay since my last video, that we were handling all that, handling finals for my son's college and stuff like that. He's 16 and in college. The burdens of breaking the cycle often entails recognizing your own imperfections and the programming that was instilled in you early on in your own childhood. And by doing that, that's a way that you can change what's needed within yourself so you don't repeat the same mistakes that other people have made, either to you or someone, close to you. For me, it was not even debatable. I lost my dad when I was 8 years old. I never even got to meet him. So, like I've said in other videos, I had to go by what other people say to get to know who he was. But that's usually only half of the story, and it sucks as an adult not having that opportunity to be able to just call him. I did not want that to be my kid's experience. So I took on the burden of having to work through my own shit to be able to be a quality person for them. So they actually had a dad as they grow up, and they could come to me if they have, questions or advice or whatever they needed me for. I would be able to be there for them. I think that it's really important to address proper versus improper guidance. I've never pinned them against their mother, and I am talking about the two older ones. I've never pinned them against their mother. I've never really said anything negative about their mother. I try to get them to treat their parents with respect no matter what. Recently, my daughter has a little bit of animosity towards her mom for things that I may cover in later videos, but I really want to talk to her to make sure it's okay with her first before I start posting stuff online. But it's really important to try not to drag, no matter what your personal feelings are on the other parent, it's really important not to drag their name through the mud. You need to let your kids experience their other parents from their own lens. Because if they have a tainted view from your perspective, and then they find out that what they thought they knew was all from your opinions and doesn't add up to their own experiences, that may actually backfire and end up causing problems for you. And that's definitely not what you want. You also don't want to give them improper guidance, because you don't want to pass on the same programming that you yourself had that you're trying to break the cycle of. So giving them guidance from a third-party perspective is usually the best way to do it, or a first-person perspective. So not necessarily instilling your own thoughts and opinions, but tell them what you would do and weigh out the good and bad options on or outcomes that may exist depending on whatever the scenario is. For example, my son wanted to do game development, and I fully supported him in doing that. He wanted to take that in college, fully supported that. As he went through his first semester, he started looking at a lot of the job postings and worrying about potential job prospects for that particular field. And while I support what he wants to do, I did let him know that there is a potential that job may end up waning, or it could skyrocket, but there's no way to really know. And if you're getting your high school to pay for a free education, maybe go for something that's a little bit more sustainable long-term, just in case. That way you have kind of a plan B, you have something you can fall back on just in case. It's always good to have a safety net and have more options. Focus on one option for sure, but at least have a backup plan or a contingency plan for just in case something goes south. You have more than one skill, so you're marketable to more than one market. I've always been really open with my kids. Another way to address breaking the cycle is being open with your kids about mistakes that you yourself have made, both as a parent and as a child, and how to address grievances properly in their teen years. So I've always allowed my kids to have some air of open communication. Not usually when a punishment is being handed to them. It's not usually a good idea because, tension is kind of high. But if, for example, if I handed a punishment to my son, I do allow him the freedom to say that, oh, well, I don't really agree with that punishment. And if he gives me a legitimate, reasonable explanation, 9 times out of 10, I'll go back on that punishment and I'll lighten it a little bit. Just so that allows me and him to operate more in line with how society operates. Obviously, they have punishments for certain things, but the punishments do vary depending on the specifics of whatever's happening. Like if someone ends someone else via self-defense, the punishment obviously is not going to be, the most extreme. Or if somebody gets in an accident and someone else ends as a result of said accident, it may not be, schmurder, but it could be, manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter, or negligent, something of that nature. Something is not quite as serious. So I do allow them some wiggle room on those things. I think it's important to be able to do that with your kids, because if you don't, they won't get a real grasp of how society works once they're out of the house. I don't want to make it so unrealistic for them that when they get out in society that they're completely blindsided. But I also don't want to helicopter parent them to where they can't make their own mistakes and learn from their own mistakes, because that's really important too. the burdens of breaking the cycle weighs heavily on your ability to sit with your own discomforts, because there are going to be times when you deal with certain situations or certain circumstances where you're going to want to, just based on human behavior patterns, you're going to want to respond in a way that is aligned with the response you yourself would have gotten as a child. It's really important not to repeat that if it's something that's, genuinely harmful. Now, I've said this before, but I am by no means a helicopter parent. I do let my kids make their own choices, and I help them weigh out the potentials of each decision. And I let them think about, what the ramifications of those are. Another thing I think is really important when it comes to breaking the cycle is how to communicate to your kids on how to approach animosity towards another parent, or not necessarily kids, but teenagers, young adults, how to approach animosity for another parent appropriately. Obviously, if a kid is upset and they want to, be rude to the other parent and they're an adult, you can't really say much. But it's not a bad idea to suggest at least try to keep things amicable, because when they're not amicable, then communication is lost and there will never be any working out any issues. I think acceptance goes a long way. You can't change your parents. You also can't choose your parents. So as long as your parents aren't, absolute pieces of shit, accepting them for who they are and what they've done is typically the higher route. I'm not really a proponent for cutting your parents out entirely unless they've genuinely caused some serious damage to you, or they continue to cause serious damage, and that goes for really anybody. But breaking the cycles, like the avenue to breaking the cycle, is one thing I think a lot of people kind of glaze over a little bit. Of course, breaking the cycle is ideal, but how you do it is really just as important as the need or the desire to break the cycle itself, because it takes just as much personal development work as it does parental development work, because you have to be constantly mindful of the things that you say to your kids. You have to be constantly mindful of how you approach certain situations, what punishments you're giving out, how you're talking to them, the tone in which you're talking to them. Just overall discipline needs to be approached in a completely different way, and you have to be very, very, very careful not to let your childhood programming show its ugly head if you were raised in a rough household. There was a whole lot of yelling, a whole lot of screaming, a whole lot of slamming doors. There was a lot of, cussing and screaming at each other. Very little effective communication, very little real conflict resolution. It was very, for lack of a better word, it was highly toxic. As an adult, I recognize that, and as a parent who's in his 40s now, I recognize how important it is to really approach parenting effectively. It's not so much about being my kid's friend as it is being their guide. Yeah, I can be friendly with my kids, but I have to set that shit aside if I want my kids to truly succeed. You can't placate to their emotions all the time. Sometimes you're going to say things that hurts their feelings, but unfortunately, the truth often hurts. And you can't really love someone and truly care for them if you're not willing to tell them what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. If you like this video and you want to see more on this topic, feel free to comment below. Feel free to like and subscribe, and thanks for tuning in. I'll have another one here shortly. Thanks.